filmmaker. Dr. Jaya, she is a filmmaker and currently professor and associate dean, School of Film and TV Arts, Jia, Liverpool University. I hope I said it right, Jaya ma'am. She has a talent for taking simple stories and engaging the audience with the characters. She's extremely skilled at getting the best possible performance out of her actors and crew, whether that are professional or amateur. As an experienced producer herself, she also understands how to ensure that projects are brought in on time and on a budget. She is also an accomplished academician. She has completed her PhD on the use of video to teach English in India. Over to you, Jaya ma'am. Welcome to the event.
That was a lovely introduction. Thank you very much. And hello, all 100 of you people. My goodness, what an audience.
They are going to go a little more than that. So you'll have to just...
I can see that, 102 now. I am very impressed. I'm very, very impressed.
102 and batting.
So, yes, I write, I direct, I produce. But on this occasion, I have adapted this play into a Bangladeshi context. It's called The Apple Pickers. And indeed, I am an actor in it. See if you recognize me. So, over to you, Mr. Srinivas Rao, and let us watch the film. Enjoy it, please.
Ma, you got to the microphone at the bottom. Click on the microphone at the bottom. Click on the... Oh.
He's doing some Bollywood dancing over there.
I can hear you now.
I don't know.
Ah, I can hear you now.
Oh, what is wrong?
Your microphone was muted.
I don't think so. I could hear you.
No, it doesn't matter. I don't have long. I start my shift in a few minutes.
Hey, how is the flight? Did anyone have it on the plane?
They turned one woman away because her swab broke and they didn't have any spares. But the rest of us were fine.
Hey, what's the farm like?
Big, 213 acres. I didn't even know there was countryside in the UK. I never saw it last time. Apparently Kent is the Garden of England.
You becoming a poet or what?
No, that's what they call it. It's where they grow all the fruit and vegetables. And they said we're a land army.
Land army, men. Always with the war. They never let anyone forget it. Normally, you are invaders coming to steal their jobs. But if nobody wants their jobs, you're a land army. Sure. Hey, how's the hotel?
What hotel?
Where you are staying?
It's a caravan.
What?
Well, it's on a farm. It's standard. Why would we be staying in a hotel?
Because you're picking apples for them. They can't put you in a hotel.
The government flew 400 Bangladeshis across. They can't afford to put us up in hotels.
May as well put you in the boot of a car.
It's fine. It's warm. It's a minute's walk to work.
Okay. Who's in there with you?
A guy, Ramesh.
What's his surname?
I don't know, Lal, I think.
I don't know that family.
Oh, you wouldn't. He's from Dhaka, not Sylhet.
Hey, hide your things. You know what they say about boys from big cities? That to a Hindu name.
Ma.
I'm just saying, beta, Dinisha's boy went to Dhaka for the weekend. And you know, he had his watch stolen.
Oh, but that's Dhaka.
If it can happen in Dhaka, it can happen in London. So, put your watch in your socks and put your socks in your bag. Trust me.
But I am not in London. I'm in the countryside in Kent.
London, Kent, they're all the same, beta. You just listen to me. Put your watch in your socks.
How is everything back home?
Oh, you know the same. You don't change. We just get older.
It's been 3 days.
Yes. And we're 3 days older. How's it being back? Do you feel okay?
It's different this time.
Yes. Now you're their hero. I hope they tell you how thankful they are to you.
Well, they're paying me.
That's money. Value beta isn't money. You are feeding the nation. You've always fed the nation. Just as well you're a good chef.
That's a bit much.
Well, the British aren't doing it. Their government called on us Bangladeshi to go back and harvest their apples for them so people can eat. First, we run their restaurants. Now the restaurants are closed. They want us to harvest their fruit. Of course, they do not even know how to look after their trees and fruits. Now you're there. You know, your father's very proud of you. He bought new windscreen wipers for the car. You remember when your brother got that job in Canada? He bought new hubcaps. That's how he is.
Fatherly love, very special.
So you're all right, huh? Because it's okay if you want to come home.
I've been here 3 days, Ma.
I just don't want to see you the way you were last time.
I won't be.
Such a shock to see you at the airport, beta. Your eyes so heavy. Your shoes stuck to the heels of your feet. Left with 2 bags, came back with 1. No one should come back with less than what they left.
And that's not their fault.
You were there for 18 months. Someone did that to you.
No one did anything to me.
Why are you defending them?
Because you make it sound like I'm the victim. I chose to come to the UK and then I chose to go back to Bangladesh. I didn't fail.
You have an engineering degree and they made you clean dishes and cook food in that
It
restaurant.
didn't make me. I wasn't forced.
So you chose to clean dishes? Why didn't you choose to get a job as an engineer?
Why are you being like this?
Because I don't like you being there. I don't understand what happened to you. Is it because that man called you a terrorist?
We get called that everywhere. Someone shouted that in Toronto as well, remember?
Then I don't understand.
It wasn't just being shouted at. That was part of it, sure, but it's something deeper in that. I don't know. When you move somewhere, everything is different. I mean, everything, the plugs, the traffic light noises, the shape of houses. You need people to help you, to make those differences as normal for you as they are to them. And look, the majority of people were very nice, polite, gentle, but they never let me in. I was always from somewhere else. Even the people who took an interest, they asked me where I was from. They said I hoped I enjoyed living there. And it was all a reminder that I was an outsider. And I didn't understand that. I don't know the signals. And then one day I was walking down the high street and this van went past very slowly. I remember because I thought how strange it was to be going so slow. And on the side it said, if you're here illegally, go home or we'll arrest you. And it had a phone number at the bottom so people could report someone they thought was an illegal immigrant.
But you're not there illegally.
But the message was the same. If you're not from here, you shouldn't be here. I worked so hard and the only signal I ever heard was, you're an outsider. In the end, it broke me to hear that every day.
They wanted your body to work, but not you.
But the majority of people are so nice.
And now you have gone back because they need your help. That is my son. In their hour of need, you will stand up and help. You are their hero. Whether they say it or not, it doesn't matter. Maybe they're too private, like you say. But I hope they know, huh?
It's a lovely country, you know. You can see why they're all so melancholy. There are no bright colors. Everything is a shade of gray, brown, or blue. The landscape is always a variation on those colors. But it can be very beautiful. at sunset or in the morning, when all the colors blend together, brooding.
Now you sound like a bloody poet.
Sweating, Ma.
Well, I'm worried that Shakespeare's going to come home.
Okay, I'm coming. Ma, look, I've got to go.
When are you back?
4 weeks.
I'll pray for you.
I love you.
Hey, don't kiss any English girls, huh?
Um,
They might have it.
we have it back home too.
Not like them.
Why are you smiling?
I just think it's interesting.
Okay, I've got to go.
Okay, remember, you are not part of any army. You are heroes. Every one of you Bangladeshis. But you, my boy, more than the others.
Okay, why me?
Because you're my son, so you're better.
Okay, yes, thanks. I love you, Ma. I'm off.
When will you call me next? বাবা ও চলে গেছে how do I turn this off এসো তো my boy আমার ছেলে my boy
Right. Shall I start?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I hope you enjoyed that. I would like to share my screen with you. And my talk today is called The Apple Pickers, Unpicking Digital Media Literacy Lessons. Okay. So let's share screen and you can tell me whether you can see my screen or not. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Now this is going to be fun because one of the things that happens to me always on Zoom is when I go full screen, I can't see the entire screen myself. So I will try not to go full screen. I'll just try and do this. Okay. Which is silly, actually. Let me try full screen. I'll always try every time, and every time I get it wrong, we'll try. Okay, let's go. So I want to begin with what is digital media literacy. I know you've already had 2 sessions on digital media literacy, but it's just worthwhile revisiting that notion. At its simplest, it is the ability to operate in a digital world. But you see, the digital world is not simply a text-based world. The digital world has images, photographs, moving images. It uses sound, and people forget sound. You know, 70% of any film is sound. And it uses texts and signs to signify things in quite non-traditional ways. And what do I mean by that? I mean, think about emojis, for example. We didn't know the word emoji 10 years ago. And now we all use those smiley faces or those frowns or those thinking faces, whatever it is, whatever emoji you want to use. So therefore, we are learning to use language in a new way. And in many ways, digital media literacy implies a combination of digital literacy and media literacy. So there we are. And I have deliberately put media literacy on first because I actually think it is quite easy. Digital literacy is at the technical level, at the user interface level, not that difficult. If it were that difficult, we would not be able to use it as ubiquitously and as easily as we do, you know. But media literacy is a completely different game, and it's much more difficult, I think. So media literacy plus digital literacy would give you digital media literacy. What no, I can't see my screen, so I will. I'm sorry, but you will just have to put up with me. Okay. Digital literacy and media literacy, what do they actually mean? Okay. On the one hand, these terms imply the ability to navigate, to listen, to assess, and ask pertinent questions and focused questions so that we learn to understand and make meaning of content that is leveraged in the digital world. This is, in fact, one definition of digital media literacy, which we will come back to at the end. On the other hand, so on the one hand, it's about digital literacy. On the other hand, unlike older media, which was created and controlled by a few people, newspapers controlled media, the BBC controlled media, they were controlled by a few people or a few organizations. Now, all of us have the ability to produce content and publish it digitally, and we distribute it as widely or as narrowly as we wish. We just share it with our family, or we share it with the whole world. My husband is a very interesting case. He tweets very regularly, and he was sharing with me the fact that his latest tweet yesterday, I don't know, his latest tweet must be today, but yesterday's tweet, he had two tweets yesterday. One had 76 hits, the other had 25,742. And he said, why does this happen, Jaya? Interesting. Nevertheless, he is somebody who has learned to publish digitally and distribute it as widely as he can. So therefore, this comes with new and different needs for both media literacy and for digital literacy. Digital literacy, that is our ability to manipulate new technologies for our own users. It is relatively easy to understand and master at the user level. I'm not talking about it at the level of analyzing big data or whatever, but at the user level, it is not so difficult. And the notion of the digital native is important here. And I'd like to tell you a little story. My niece lives in Canada, and her husband was talking to their child. And he said to him, Ewan, and Ewan was 4, the child was 4 years old. And he said, Ewan, when I was your age, there were no computers. We only had television. We didn't have any computers or anything like that. And Ewan stood there and thought for some time. And then he looked at his dad and he said, how did you Google things then? You see, for a 4-year-old, the question is, how did you Google things? Digital literacy is something that is just part of children. They play with their parents' phone. They use Google. It is how they are. So therefore, these technologies are just part of their lived world experience. It is nothing new to them. But there is a sense of ethics and responsibility that comes with the territory of digital media literacy. And I know you've been talking about it this morning when you've been talking about privacy, for example. Yeah. And that has become more important today, more important than ever before. Let me give you an example. Suppose you see a man and a woman, and they look really lovely. And you think, oh, they make such a beautiful picture. And you take a photograph. And the photograph looks good. So you share it on Instagram or on Facebook or wherever, in China, you'd share it on WeChat Moments. It doesn't matter where you share it, you share it. You don't know this man, nor do you know this woman. Suppose this man was married to somebody else and you innocently shared a photograph. For you, it was just a beautiful composition. It was an aesthetic pleasure. But think about the trouble it has caused this man and his relationship with his wife. Now, suppose you did know the man And suppose you did know that this woman he is with is not his wife, and you publish that image, you are creating mischief, right? You know, either way, there is a sense of ethics and a sense of responsibility that you have for the images that you create. Now, I worked at the BBC and I have always been very, very aware of this responsibility because it is something that was instilled in us at the BBC. And you know, you at the BBC, you always ask questions like, if you're in a war zone and you see somebody getting hit, should you be rescuing them as a human being or should you be filming it? What should you be doing? Either way, you know, whatever you do, there is a sense of ethics and a sense of responsibility that you have for the images that you create. And discussions about these areas can lead us to many places. The role of big data, the role of fake news, which, by the way, a lot of that happens in India. Nobody questions your WhatsApp. You think, oh, it's on WhatsApp, it must be true. I cannot believe the stupidity that my relations in India have and how naive they are in the way they believe WhatsApp and how much the Indian government is controlling this and putting out fake news. Not very different from what Trump did, okay? And then because of all that, the role of self-censorship. Because you think, oh my God, I better not talk about this. I better not put this up. God alone knows, kya yaar, who is looking at this, kisko malum, you know? So you self-censor even before anyone else censors you. Then the role of government policy in all of this. So you have questions of freedom versus abuse, as in the story that I told you, cyberbullying and so on. I mean, there are just this whole notion of digital media literacy opens up a myriad amount of questions, right? But my argument, and my central argument, is this, that actually we've had media literacy for a very long time. In fact, from the days of newspapers, you know, every morning the newspaper would come, and older people like me remember when we got these daily newspapers delivered to our doors. You young people do not remember this because it never happened in your lives. But believe you me, only 30 odd years ago, this was routine in every middle class home. Okay, and what would happen? We would evaluate the stories we read in the papers. In my family, you could not get to the dining table without having read the paper. You felt like a fish out of water. So any time I invited my friends, I would say to them, please read the newspaper and come to my house. Don't come, otherwise my dad will kill you. You know, you'll feel so foolish. So that is what used to happen. We would evaluate these stories. And what would these stories do? They would add to our understanding of the world. They would alter our understanding of the world a little bit. They would shift it, they would nuance it, and we would arrive at newer understandings. So therefore, there was constantly a foundation and you built upon it and you shifted a little bit like a Jenga, you know, you move a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit there, but you're constantly trying to keep the Jenga up. So it always nuanced the world we lived in. Today, our use and indeed our abuse of digital media confers upon us the same sense of media literacy that has always been important. This sense of media literacy has never actually left us, you know. It has always been important, especially now that we're both content creators and content consumers at one and the same time. And in this, I am with Henry Jenkins. Henry Jenkins argues that the new media literacies should be taken as an expansion of, rather than a substitution for, mass media literacies. After all, you are called the Institute of Mass Media. You know, what are you called? You're called College of Mass Media, or College of the Mass Media is a word that occurs in your name. And these mass media literacies are extremely important. I would argue further And in this, I'm rather old-fashioned and probably very traditional. And I would argue that the principles of media literacy that have been developed over the past 2 centuries are enduring. Let us not throw the baby out with the bathwater. That does not mean that we don't have to contend with the new. We do. Things change, the world changes. So what I would like to do is take apple pickers as an example of a project in which I was involved, where the old and the new blend, and where digital media is used in very specific ways to discuss issues that are current and very pertinent to our times, but also issues that have a long history to them, you know? So let's look at the apple pickers. What is the apple pickers? Well, let me give you a little bit about the context of the film that you have just watched. It is a film that you watched, but it was not a film, okay? Let me take you back. The writing, it's actually written by a guy, it's an original play, and it was written by a guy called Nicholas McQuillan, and it was about a Bulgarian apple picker. Now, Theatre 503 in London got in touch with me and they said that they're looking for someone to adapt it to the Indian context. And I said to them, no Indian would go to the UK to pick apples. Don't be silly. We are IT people, you know. We do IT. Maximum, we are doctors. You know, we're not even bloody lawyers in the UK. We are doctors and we're IT people. That's what we are. No Indian would go to pick apples, I said to them. And then I thought of for a couple of days and I thought, actually, a Bangladeshi just might, you know, because Bangladeshis run restaurants. They are waiters in restaurants. So Bangladeshis, it would fit that class. So I said I would adapt it to a Bangladeshi context. And I sent it off to them and they liked it. They came back to me. Now, this is a play. This play is going to happen during COVID-19 times. It is going to be watched as a play. There is no cut in the film, not a single cut, because it's a play and it's meant to be experienced like a play. And yet what it does is it COVID into account, the context that people are sitting at home to watch this play, okay? And the context that the film itself is set in COVID times. So it's played cleverly with the context. It's played cleverly with language because it shifts between Bengali and English, but only Bengali only at the beginning and Bengali only at the end. Everything else happens in English. So what does language do to that? Well, language gives you a sense that there are two cultures happening, but the dominant language is, of course, English. Like the dominant people in the play who are not even in the play are British, you know. The accent, that is quite interesting, trying to move to an Indian accent. And every time I watch it, I see the places where I don't sound Indian. The clothes, and that was also very interesting because, of course, trying to look like Bangladeshi Silheti, very specifically, Silheti Muslim woman was for me very interesting. So, but the theatricality of the show, the fact that this was a theater piece and not a film piece, there were certain constraints that were deliberately introduced. We had to play it and record it simply as one take. There were no multiple takes. That was it. We did it, finished. End of story. And of course, I talked to you about the viewing context in COVID-19 times. This was actually done on the 21st of July, 2021. So in the play, film play, there is a lot of digital literacy that frames it. You know, at the beginning of the play, the mother is talking to other people who are off screen. She hasn't got her microphone on. She's muted, exactly like I was at the beginning of this session, you know. And she doesn't even realize that she is muted. So, and at the end of it all, he's gone. The image, his image disappears. But she's still there saying, when are you going to talk to me next? What's going to happen now? And then ultimately saying, hey, somebody come and switch this off. I can't switch it off. Oh my God, switching it off is too big for her, you know? That is the text. Now, I'm deliberately going to use words like text and subtext, and these are film language words, particularly filmmakers' language, rather than words used in digital media literacy. And I'm deliberately doing that because I am a filmmaker, and that defines me in many ways. So, but that was the text. That is what was said. What is the subtext? The subtext is that the mother is digitally less literate. And interestingly, it plays into the stereotype of women as being less digitally literate than men. Older people are less sophisticated about the digital world than younger people. You see, what it has done is it has framed it within those stereotypes. It reinforces the stereotypes. But the stereotypes exist because to some extent stereotypes are true, you know? And in putting it in that context, I played with that notion of stereotypes. But look also at what has happened to this project. It implies a huge amount of digital literacy. The fact that we had to record it, they actually sent us very detailed instructions about how to record, how to upload, and so on, you know? So the play is performed digitally, it is disseminated digitally, you know? And there's a huge amount of digital literacy assumptions that the creators have, you know? They just assume that you will be able to do this. And today you have viewed it in two kinds of settings, a more conventional setting, sitting in that room. But for this to happen, I had to send the film via WeTransfer to you guys, right? Another use of digital media, right? And then you had to download it, you had to edit it, and then you had to play it. So therefore, and you have now viewed it in many different settings. There are some of you who are online. There are some of you who are sitting in that room. So therefore, you know, the community setting, the online setting, it becomes a blended setting. Think about it. The play was made in July 2021. My son, he actually also happens to be my son, he was sitting in London. I was sitting in Wales. We were talking about a Bangladeshi story and we were recording it in the UK. And now we are discussing it through Zoom across China and India. Just look at how complex the digital world is. But we all negotiated. And none of this is actually very difficult. And all of us have learned to negotiate it very well and tell stories. That is what we are in the business of, right? Okay. Oh, sorry. So I am arguing that digital literacy, even though it can be quite complex, at the user level is not that difficult to accomplish. What is much more challenging is the question, what kind of media literacy do we need to understand the story? And how do our perceptions of the world change through the experience of the apple pickers? To unpick this, let's simply begin by recapping the story. The story is a conversation between a young Bangladeshi man who's gone to the UK as an apple picker and his mother, who lives in rural Sylhet. So how does this conversation take place? In the old days, it would have been a telephone conversation and it would have been very expensive. Today, it is probably on Zoom, it is probably free for the users. And there are implications, as I've already mentioned, about setting the story in COVID-19 days. But really, what is the story really about? Now, to uncover this, we have to look at the assumptions that are being made. The first assumption is that apple pickers are often migrant workers. And this is true across the world. The second assumption is that migrant workers are exploited, which is also true across the world. And I don't mean just apple pickers as migrant workers. Look at what happens in the Middle East with Indian and Bangladeshi migrant workers. Their passports get taken away. They get put into trucks like cattle, if you see them, and they're taken to building sites, which is where they work. So the same thing happens to migrant workers in the UK. They are exploited. They're paid a pittance, and they're treated very, very badly, even in the UK. Don't think that just because it's a westernized country, they treat people well. They don't. Okay. And the third is the workers themselves are there for the money. Otherwise, nobody would do it. Nobody would be an apple picker. So what is the text? What I want to do is look at the text and then look at the subtext. Now, in no particular order, what is the text? What happens? What do we know about the son? We know that he's an engineer. He doesn't really have a proper job. He's found it hard. He's been to the UK once before for 18 months, and he was a chef in a restaurant at that time. And this time, he's an apple picker for 4 months. The government flew 400 Bangladeshis to the UK to pick apples. I don't think it was the government. He doesn't even understand that. No UK government would do that. It would actually be some private apple picking company. But it shows you the level of ignorance between the mother and the son when they say it's the government that sent 400 people. Okay, flew 400 Bangladeshis to the UK to pick apples, and this in spite of COVID-19. The threat of illness is all around them. On his flight, a woman was turned away because her swab broke. He lives in a caravan, not in a hotel, and he justifies it as being warm and close to work. Okay, what else do we know? We know that Ramesh Lal is a Hindu boy from Dhaka who's his roommate, and that he has a brother in Toronto, and he has also been to Toronto, and he was called a terrorist there. So therefore, he's used to such unfounded racist abuse. And we also know that he has a shift to go to, so he's going to go soon. So the conversation has to be short. Therefore, the conversation becomes precious. He has been there in the UK for only 3 days, but already his mother misses him. Now, the other way around, what do we know about the mother? We know that she's not as digitally literate as her son. She's middle class, okay? She laughs tongue in cheek with references to Shakespeare, and she calls her son a poet. You know, she has her own opinion about men and about land armies. And she's a very curious human being, you know. Hey, how was the flight? Did anyone have COVID? Who's your roommate? How's the hotel? You know, she asks question after question after question. And she has her own stories to tell. She tells the story of Dinesh, who lost his watch in Dhaka. And of course, she's anxious about her son. She wants her son to be careful. Hide your watch. Don't kiss English girls. Not good for you. You know, and she's very moralistic, actually. You know, in there, and it's really, if you think about it, in India, in Bangladesh, in our subcontinent, from the time you're children, you know, you're told the moral of the story is. So what is the moral of the story? They ask you. And she is quite moralistic, and she comes out with these pithy sayings. In their hour of need, you are there to help them, you know. Money does not make values. She casts her son and other Bangladeshis in a very nationalistic, she uses nationalistic jargon to cast them, you know. And she's amused. She's also quite funny. She's amused that her husband bought windscreen wipers for their car. He had bought hubcaps before when the other son went to Toronto. So we now know that both her sons are abroad. And although this son has been in the UK for only 3 days, we know that she misses him. Okay, so this is what we know through the story. This is the text that we hear. What is the subtext? The subtext is always more important than the text. Okay, the subtext, what happens to class and race, that is what the story deals with in so many ways. In Bangladesh, the family is educated, it's aspiring middle class. But the moment the son comes to the, he is cast as working class. He has a restaurant job, or he's an apple picker. He does not have a middle class job with middle class standing. He's immediately cast as working class. He protests that he's not a victim, but as Lady Gertrude in Hamlet would say, he doth protest too much, methinks. He is a victim. And he is a victim of the most powerful people in the play, the British, the white British, who you don't even see. The implication is that we are supposed to be, we are not supposed, and therefore the implication is that we, you and I, are not supposed to be interested in the feelings of such people, people who are merely there to serve a purpose. And yet, here is a sensitive young man who's trying to make sense of his world. He experiences poverty and he experiences racism, but yet he needs to find meaning. Otherwise, how can he make sense of the world he is in, he finds himself in? And how does he find meaning? He finds meaning through beauty, through describing the countryside. And look, really, this is a picture of the Kent countryside. He describes it in romantic words, in romantic terms, the blues and the grays and the browns, the blues and the grays and the greens, and even the browns, And he describes them in romantic terms almost in order to cope with the ignominy of belonging to the wrong class, the wrong race. He is the outsider, and he even calls himself an outsider. So how can he cope? By thinking of the beauty of the place and of the people. Most of them are kind, most of them are okay, he says, The mother is grimly aware of the situation, but she chooses to cast her son as a hero. She glosses over the problems of his being an outsider by making him a nationalistic hero, by absorbing him. So at another level, she does not, her son is fascinated by the other. You should read Edward Said. Said talks about the other and Orientalism and all that, which will take us, I haven't quite referred to Orientalism over here, but the other is very interesting. And he has a fascination with the other. He needs to keep going back to the UK. She doesn't understand that fascination. So she chooses to recast his need for belonging, not feeling like an outsider, by turning him into a heroic figure who belongs to her, who belongs to Bangladesh. Amar Chele, my boy. That's how she ends it. She ends it through a sense of belonging, But what is interesting is that prejudice, the play also deals with prejudice, not just the prejudice of the white people against this poor Bangladeshi apple picker, but also prejudice is not confined to any one ethnic group, It can and does happen everywhere. Just as the son experiences prejudice in the UK, he is aware of his mother's prejudices and he argues against them. She is suspicious of Hindus. Be careful, beta. This is a Hindu boy. Just think of the number of times in India now you guys are suspicious of Muslims and Christians. Don't think it's just Muslims being suspicious of Hindus, the other way around as well. And the British played with that sense from 1857 onwards. The Sepoy Mutiny was 1857, don't forget, okay? So this is not new to us. And she's suspicious of English girls. They have a different kind of COVID, not our kind of COVID. And indeed, she's suspicious of anyone who's not from Sylhet. Don't go to Dhaka. My God, you lose your phone and your watch and everything in Dhaka. Don't go to Dhaka. Never mind the UK, you know. So what does this do to our story? Just like the newspapers and the newspaper stories nuanced our understanding of life, the fact that she is also prejudiced nuances our story. It moves it slightly to hint that prejudice is not just about people from richer nations being prejudiced against people from poorer nations, but also prejudice exists within nations and within peoples. So what does it do? It creates more rounded stories. It creates more rounded people rather than simply stereotyping people. So for me, the story is ultimately humanist in philosophy, but eventually sad. Nevertheless, it certainly made me ask questions about class. How is it that a middle class person becomes a working class person from just simply by taking an aeroplane? About language. How do we privilege English over Bengali or Hindi or any other language that we speak? About power relations and about ethnicity. What happens to us as ethnic groups? A majority in Bangladesh becomes a minority in the UK and has to face all the minority questions and problems. So bringing the whole thing back to the notion of digital media literacy, we need to ask the question, who is telling the story? And why is such a story being told now? I would now like to turn to Marx. In the 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte in 1852, it's an interesting thing to read. I read it when I was probably your age. I've revisited bits of it, not all of it, recently. In fact, in writing this paper, I thought, oh, I should reread that. It is a good read. If you have time, do have a look at it. But what Marx says is that men make their own history, but they do not make it as they please. They do not make it under self-selected circumstances, but under circumstances existing already, given and transmitted from the past. The tradition of all dead generations weighs like a nightmare on the brains of the living. And just as they seem to be occupied with revolutionizing themselves and things, creating something that did not exist before, precisely in such epochs of revolutionary crisis, they anxiously conjure up the spirits of the past to their service, borrowing from them names, battle slogans, and costumes in order to present this new scene in world history in time-honored disguise and borrowed language. Now, what does Marx actually mean by this? I mean, it sounds quite a mouthful, and if you analyze it, it's very interesting. But for me, what Marx is really saying is that we cannot escape our times. We are products of our time, and we cannot escape it. You cannot even try to escape it. Even when you look at science fiction, you know, science fiction deals with our anxieties of the present. And the Apple Pay is firmly rooted in our times. For one thing, the story is set in the midst of a global pandemic. It is produced in pandemic times. And now we are discussing it remotely, precisely because of the pandemic. Otherwise, we would be face to face. But more subtly, it is written in the wake of a huge movement that started in the United States, but it has spread worldwide. Black Lives Matter. And Black people want to think for themselves. They need to think for themselves. They try to make sense of the world for themselves. And in their own little way, they try to engage with the world in a more positive way, even when the life forces around them are negative. It is about wanting to be positive in your own lives, you know. So let us return to Cabbage's definition of digital media literacy that we started off with. The ability to navigate, to listen, to assess, to ask pertinent and focused questions, to understand and make meaning of content, i.e. apple pickers, leveraged in the digital world, i.e. in the world in which it was created. And I have one final question. To know whether apple pickers really succeed or not, we do have to ask the question, did the story tell us something about the world we did not know before? Did the story move us in ways to examine our own attitudes and our own prejudices? This is always the hope. And if it did move you or even entertained you in COVID-19 days for 10 minutes, it's worth it. For me, it's worth it. I certainly got a lot out of it. And this is the comment I wrote for Theatre 503, the commissioners of the piece, after we recorded it. I wrote, I was surprised when my son called me and asked me to be in a play with him. I had not acted for nearly 40 years and was understandably quite nervous. He reassured me, saying that it was a community project and that I would be up to the task. He then said, and by the way, can you adapt it to the Indian situation? But the play is called The Apple Pickers, and it is about a Bulgarian man's experience. At this point, I must tell you that I'm a writer-director, but not in theatre, rather than in films and TV. I thought about it for a couple of days and realized that although I could not adapt it to an Indian situation, I could adapt it to a Bangladeshi one. I created the adaptation and sent it off to him. I waited nervously to see how he would react to it. He was positive, and we decided to record. The experience was quite thrilling. I felt nervous, as I had felt all those years ago when I was on stage. But the nerves were soon replaced by the demands of the character, and I thoroughly enjoyed the experience. Watching the play back, it is quite amusing to see how the character I play is slightly over the top, enthusiastic, and has no clue about the world her son faces. In contrast, the son played by my own son is low-key, tries to explain his world to his mother, but gives up, resigned in the knowledge that she will never understand. But perhaps she understands only too well. Few mothers have the chance to be cast with their sons. I have been privileged to be given this chance. Added to it, knowing that this is a community project where people's voices and their stories really matter, it made a world of difference to me and brought back my confidence in my acting abilities that I had forgotten for nearly 40 years. Thank you for this opportunity. I feel incredibly privileged and really hope that people enjoyed the play. That is what I wrote because they wanted a statement. And I hope you've enjoyed it. Here are the references, and here's my email. So I will stop sharing. Comments, guys, comments.
Okay, the guys can give comments. They better wait. They can just ruminate the whole thing and come back to you. But I wanted to say this in the beginning of the question answer session, that here comes a person on the virtual screen who is a filmmaker, who is a research scholar, who is an actor, who is a writer, who has worked with BBC and Sony, who has worked with the top, companies, which I'm sure you have not shared with the conference committee. And personally, I have seen you the way you work, Jaya, and it's not about the 9 minutes film. It's not about the title of the conference. It's the apt words you used, the kind of explanation you gave about the text and subtext. That's where the beauty was, I think. Amazing, amazing. I just have one question before my students start asking you, because then I will leave the floor for them. And that is, what made you feel nervous about being an actor? I don't answer immediately. I'm saying, is it, there was also a subtext there where certification as a mother from the son was also a concern. Did you realize that?
Of course I did. You must be joking if you think I didn't realize that. Of course I did. Okay, let me answer this in in 2 or 3 ways. Um, I am a director. I know what I ask of my actors. And I also know that at the end of the day, who remembers a director? Nobody. You remember the actors, right? Arey yaar, isme Amitabh Bachchan tha. Okay? Okay, Sholay, we all know Ramesh Sippy. Usko chodo. Other than that, think about any other Bachchan film. Kitne hain yaar? How do you know who was the director?
Right.
Who cares? Okay? You always know the actor who's in front of the screen. Okay? This is Richard Gere. Who cares who directed it? But you remember the actor, George Clooney, Richard Gere, even Woody Allen, even though you know that Woody Allen directed it, it's still a Woody Allen film because Woody
The
Allen is the actor, right? So I know that all my films, anybody's films, are carried by the actor. So there is that responsibility of carrying it. And that makes you nervous, you know. The fact that you could let somebody down makes you nervous. But without those nerves, you're never good. You have to have nerves. Then the fact that my son asked me to do it, I have never worked with him. This was the first time I was working with him. He's younger. He had the upper hand, and I deliberately chose not to have the upper hand. He was the one who was going to direct me. I was like, oh my, yes, it's difficult, you know. So yes, I was very nervous. And somebody says, direct director is a good actor. That's what I believe. Yes, of course, directors have to be good actors, you know. And we often say SRK ki film thi, huh? Of course we do. SRK ki film thi. Yes, of course we do. Yeah. And a truly global endeavor. It now feels like a global endeavor. It didn't feel at that time. At that time when we were recording it, it felt small. It felt, oh my God, I'm locked up in Wales and my son is locked up in London in a flat, you know. But now looking back, it feels like we did something.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you, Jaya, for that very interesting session. The floor is open for questions. You can raise your hands.
Or even comments, you know, raise
Yes.
hands, type messages, whatever.
Yeah, yeah. Siddhant. Srinivas, you can unmute him, Siddhant.
Hello, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. So I really liked the short film. I really liked the conversation, the dialogue between you two. Um, I I just have a comment to make. What I really liked about it is that it felt so real. The journey of the conversation, how it began and how it ended, it's so authentic because every time I speak to my mother, she bombards with me with useless questions that I'm not interested in answering, and yet I am involved in that conversation because she's my mother, and I do end up replying to those questions. And as the conversation unravels, by the end I am slightly annoyed, but I'm also entertained and I'm also fascinated. So that felt really incredible. So that's just my comment. And
Thank you. I
one
was
more thing.
trying to do all that, you know.
Yeah. And one
Siddhant,
more
you
thing.
realize if you had attended the morning session, this is what digital immigrants to digital natives are. And she put it across so beautifully.
Yes,
Jaya
ma'am,
ma'am.
definitely.
Yeah, yeah.
And ma'am, I would like your advice on this. So Is your son a trained actor?
He's an actor, yes, yes, and he's
Okay,
he's
okay.
at
So,
he's in Lambda. You know, he's at the London Academy of Media. What's it called? London Academy of Music and Dramatic Arts. The
Yeah.
three the three best acting schools in the world are RADA, Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, Lambda, London Academy of Music and Dramatic Arts, and Juilliard's in the United States. And he tried to get in 4 times. So the fourth
okay,
time he was successful. He's an actor and he's training to be an actor. Yes. So if
great,
any of
great.
you wants to cast him, he's
Yeah.
available.
So, so my question is, so how easy or how difficult it is to direct someone who is your son or who's related
I
to
did
you?
not direct him. He directed me.
Oh,
This
okay,
was
okay, okay, okay.
this was for me difficult, you know, to step back and to say, okay, I hand it over. I'm only an actor. I wrote it. I wrote it for them, but I did not expect to be acting at that time. I expect they wanted it turned into a Bangladeshi thing. So I was sitting there in COVID-19 days. I was teaching online. I teach in China. I was teaching online. So it all felt so disconnected. So here was a project finally that I could do that. And I said, yeah, okay, I'll write the adaptation and send it to you. So I wrote the adaptation and sent it. And then they could not cast it. They didn't find someone. So they came back to me and said, will you act? I said, but I haven't acted. It doesn't matter. And, you know, he was very reassuring. He was like any director towards an actor. Oh, it'll be fine. You're good. I know how good you are. I was like, it sounded like me coming back to myself listening to him.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the answer.
Any other questions we have?
Can you type these names in the chat box? What names are you looking for, Pranav?
Tanzila Sheikh. So on the screen, you see a hand.
Oh, okay. Lambda.
Hi, ma'am.
Julia.
How are you?
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah.
Hi, ma'am.
They're
I
the
really
three.
like. Can I speak?
Yes,
Yes, Tanzila.
Tanzila.
Hi, ma'am. I really like the film and the conversation between the son and a mother. You know, a lot of times between me and my mother, we just talk, and then there's a shift in the thinking, the way she thinks, and the way I think. So while making the film and after making the film, was there a shift between you guys, as in the way he thinks and the way you think? Was there a shift in that?
That's an interesting question. Um, you know, Hari and I are very close as people, emotionally. He is, by the way, one of triplets. I have triplets, and he is the
Oh my God.
eldest by 1 minute. Okay. So, did it change? Not really, because we talk about film and theater an awful lot, you know, things he likes, things I like, and he often guides me. And I've often, you know, I learn a lot from young people. That's why I teach,
Yeah.
because you young people know an awful lot more than I do. And I'm always very grateful to young people, not just for helping me with digital media, and I am less literate than almost any young person on that front. And so the stereotype is true, uh, but also because he'll say, Mom, you should watch this. Have you seen this interview? Have you done this? Have you done that? So you know, he's always guided me. And of course I will also say things like, yesterday I said to him, Hari, have you read the filmmaker's intuition? By the way, the filmmaker's intuition is a book by a woman called Judith Weston, and it's worth reading. And I was asking him, have you read it, you know? And he said, well, I looked at it a little bit. I said, no, go get it and I'll try and get you a copy. So, you know, we have that relationship in any case. And I'm often guided by him. So it didn't shift it very much.
Okay.
But I
So
think it made him a little more confident, you know.
after the film,
Yes, yes.
Okay, so I mean, this is what I mean. I have also observed, and in the film, when you are talking about the shift in the working class, in the middle class turning into a working class, going to another country. In my family as well, there are many people who like my mamus and all who go out there in the Middle East and then they work and they have seen. So, ma'am, but in India also, on in our own country as well, we see such kind of things. What will be your take on the same thing? Like in India also, we have working class and as well as middle class. You know,
Of course we do. Yes. I mean, think about all the maid servants who come to our houses and clean for us. You know, I often think that the reason why many women can work is because we subjugate other women. You know, I'm always very concerned about the fact that um, don't think I don't have an IE. Here they're called IEs, you know. I am very grateful to my IE. Just because I think this does not mean I do not use people like that. But here is what I
yeah, yeah,
think. I mean, similarly with child labor, you know, it is not that we should not have these people to help us. It
uh-huh.
is that we should treat them with dignity.
Equal.
You know, there is a
Exactly.
dignity of labor. Why should your maid servant sit on the floor? Why can't she sit on the sofa with you? Why should she have a different drinking glass? Why can't she have this one of your glasses? Why can't she have one of your plates? It's all those little things that we do consciously or unconsciously. अरे यार ये तो परंपरा है वो उसकी माँ भी ऐसे करती थी और अब ये भी करती है. That is rubbish.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You know, and that I think the necessity to treat somebody else with dignity, because that is how I would like to be treated, is very important.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Mhm. Think about it, you know, when your Aya or your maidservant or whatever you call her, if she cannot come to work in your house, for whatever reason, COVID was a very good example of that, they lose livelihood. Who's going to feed them? Who's going to look after them? You can't make people lose their livelihood. You have to treat them with dignity.
Jaya, there is one more hand I can see, Kritarth. Srinivas, can you unmute him?
Good evening, ma'am. First of all, Jaya ma'am, I must say it's a really big honor for us to have this conversation here today with you. And if this is the pre-event to the summit, we can only expect greatness to the following 2 days that will come. Ma'am, as I'm not really an actor, but I do love to tell stories as a storyteller, a narrator, or a writer by that means. And everybody is truly appreciating the dialogue that happened today between the mother and the son. Ma'am, you talked about texts and subtexts. As a writer, we always give prominence to what we are trying to tell. But as you said, subtext is very much prominent and as important, maybe in certain cases, more important than what the text is actually communicating.
Yes. Yes.
So, ma'am, I just wanted to ask that it was a normal conversation between a mother and a son, but you brought in so many complex issues which are really the talk of the world right now. But it did not feel as if you are building up to such big conversations, which truly we do not have definitive answers to at this point of time. Maybe at some point in future we may have, or we may learn from this. How does a writer build his story structure in terms of dialogues or narrative so that the subtext is as dominant to people of all levels of perception and not just people who have academically studied or analyzed films? How can we make the common man realize the importance and prominence of subtext? As a
Okay,
writer, what can I do?
this is where digital literacy comes in, you know, and this is where writing is so important. Um, the analysis of text and subtext is an analysis that happens afterwards. You say text is important, subtext is sometimes more important. No, You're wrong. Subtext is always more important than text. Text conveys subtext. That's what text does. It conveys subtext. Okay, so how do you make text? That's the question you're really asking. How do I write? The answer is actually very simple and at the same time very difficult. Imagine the scene. Imagine what people say. And don't imagine it in English unless English is the language in which you think. I don't always think in English. I think, and even though English is pretty well now my mother tongue, I speak Kannada at home, I speak Hindi, I speak Bengali, I sometimes speak a bit of Punjabi badly, I speak a bit of Tamil, and I speak English, okay? And sometimes a bit of French and a bit of Italian. I think in the language that is easiest for me. I do not always think in English, particularly when a character is speaking. No. I think in the language that that character, which is why it was for me Bengali. And I could speak the Bengali, I could think like her. You have to imagine the character and think like them and speak like them. And then you will find when you are writing the dialogue that you will use more complicated words than they will use. In the BBC, we spent a lot of time rereading what we had written and making the words simpler. Now, this defies academic training. Academic training teaches you to use more and more complicated words. The more complex the words, the bigger your words, the better your marks. Rubbish. The more simple your words, the more direct your words, the more true and honest your words, the better your work. I mean, think about Picasso. You know, it is very difficult to be simple. Picasso starts off painting all over the place, you know, doing very realistic images. What does he end up with? Triangles. You know, what's it called? Demoiselle d'Avignon. It is triangles. He reduces it all to simplicity. Devilishly difficult to be simple. So you have to keep going back. So writing is all about rewriting. And forget subtext. Just feel it. Think, what will this person say? And every human being is complex, you know. The subtext will come out later. That's the analysis bit. You have to feel it. You have to feel your characters. And they must be characters, real characters, not people on a page. They must live outside that page, you know. What happens to her once she says, hey, somebody come and switch this off? She goes into the kitchen to make puri. That's what she does. Okay, I know what she does. In my head, I've already worked out what she does. And what happens before? She's trying to tell the kids to shut up. They Bollywood dance. I'm on an important call with my son. You know, you have to imagine what happens outside those 10 minutes because these people have to be real. He is going to go apple picking. So you have to imagine these things both before and after, you know. He has just come back. He's just been to the toilet, washed his hands and thinks, oh, I've got 5 minutes. I'm going to call my mom. You know, all these things, you have to think of these characters as real. Then subtext comes by itself. Don't worry about it. Here's another question. Okay. Since you both belong to the same industry, how do you have conversations where you both have polar opposite opinions regarding a topic? That is very easy. We agree to disagree. Ah, no, Hari, I don't agree with you, I'll say to him. Ah, but mom. Yeah. So what? One day you'll grow up, Hari. Finished. End of story. You know. I guess this completely depends on directors' work, how well you treat the audience. Many directors overshadow their cast even in India nowadays, people go for Bhansali, Anurag, Rajkumar Hirani, Sujit Dibakar. So I guess you might be wrong कि सब actors को याद रखते हैं. नहीं, that is true. I'm not saying कि हर समय. I'm not saying हर समय. I'm saying ज़्यादातर. There is a very big difference between har samay and zyadatar, you know. I don't think we are at that stage in India. How many people watched Gangs of Wasipur in theaters? Most of us have watched it on YouTube or somewhere. That is true about everybody, right? Especially nowadays in COVID-19 times. You can't go to the cinema in many countries. In China, you can. China has no COVID. But in most countries, it's true, China has no COVID, you know. But most of us now watch. Look, I've just finished voting for BAFTA. I'm a voting member at BAFTA. I watched them all online. How could I go and nobody could watch it in the cinemas, you know? So most of us have watched it on YouTube or somewhere. People look for big faces on a movie poster and it will take some time in India to go away. No, the movie posters will simply be replaced by your YouTube posters and your Instagram pieces of those actors. Actors carry stories, whether it's a well-known actor or whether it's me. It doesn't matter. Actors carry stories. Yes, Gaurav, do you agree? That's what I think in any case.
Ma'am, another question.
Okay.
Sorry if I'm bothering you.
No.
This is strictly from a writing perspective. So talking about subtext and adding more depth to the dialogue, to the conversation. So on the outside, it looks like a conversation between a mother and a son. It's a normal conversation, but you as a writer, you have added certain layers, a certain depth to the conversation. So how do you as a writer filter out or edit or keep in mind to not make it preachy, so that the listener does not
Do not
feel
make it
that
what, sorry?
preachy,
Preachy.
that
This
yeah,
is a big
yeah.
problem.
Yes. So how do you tackle that obstacle as a writer? Can you please elaborate on that?
I think it is quite easy for me, you know. It may not be easy for everyone, but it is easy for me. And the reason for that is I have always hated people being preachy towards me. And my God, yeah, Indian girls, they have so much bloody preachiness going on at them. As fucking awful. Yeah, it's just terrible. Pardon my swearing, but it really is just awful the way people preach at you. You know, almost from the time you're born. You know, don't cross your legs. Sit properly. It begins with etiquette, and then eat with your mouth closed, and then don't go out with boys. Come back before 10 o'clock.
Don't laugh loud.
Don't laugh loudly, and certainly no smoking in public. And what did I do when I was 16 and 17? Of course, I smoked in public. Not because I wanted to be a smoker, but because I wanted to defy convention. And in those days, when I was growing up, if you smoked, oh, you must be a bitch. You must have sex with every man you see. You cannot be trusted. Your reputation was mud. And my poor parents, they put up with so much. And you know, the moment I went to the UK, I stopped smoking. I didn't need to prove that. So I hate preachiness. And because I hate preachiness, I make sure that my characters are not preachy. But it is a real problem. And my students have this very big problem. Chinese students have the same problem as Indian students. And that is, what is the moral of the story? Stories don't need morals. It is for the audience to discover a moral if they want to. They may not want to. Why should you discover a moral? Why should you have a moral? Stories need themes, yes. but they don't need morals, you know. And if you create characters who are rounded, then there is no question of morality. There is only a question of this kind of human being. You must love all your characters, even the villains. You must love them because you've created them. You know, you're God. When you're creating, when you're writing, you have complete, total control over your characters. You are God. Don't forget. Aham Brahmasmi. We in the Indian subcontinent are a shame-based culture. So are the Chinese, by the way. These social conditions you're talking about are so relatable and suffocating. Yes, it's like we can't live life on our own terms. Yes. So what do? Put them in stories. That's what you do. You chuck them in there. You get rid of it out of yourself. You know, you become creative. You use those tools to become creative. That's what you do. I agree with you, Ritika. And it is very, very difficult and shameful. Cultures of the East often get preachy. I know. I don't know why. You know, maybe it's because we're poor. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. And that's something to think about. Why do we get so preachy? I don't know. But I hate it. I hate preachiness. And I hate male domination, you know. So I fight. Yeah, go on. What were you saying?
I don't think it's poverty because I've seen that kind of culture in Korea, in China, in Japan. I think we have had the history of kingdoms and empires and that social classes. So I think that's why that preachiness comes from there. You need to.
So does the West. I mean, Germany has had kings after kings after kings after kings. Britain has had kings after kings after kings after kings. They're less preachy. They were more preachy. Don't forget that they came to India to convert us, to turn us into Christians. You know, something has happened. I'll tell you what happened. And I am only speculating because I haven't actually studied this. But think about it, you know, Virginia Woolf writes on around 1900, human nature changed. Okay. Darwin comes along, and with Darwin comes the death of God. And for Darwin, it's a very big problem because he wants to believe in God and his wife believes in God, you know. It is a huge problem. The death of God is a very big problem. And the death of God stops people from being preachy. For us, God is all our gods are very important.
And Jaya, if you remember, Virginia Woolf wasn't liked for her kind of writing, The Stream of Consciousness.
Of course. Yes, of course.
Yeah, she was pretty ridiculed for her ways of, you know, messing up with the text. So yeah, very true.
Yes, indeed, of course. You know.
Even the church opposed Darwin when he proposed the theory of evolution, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, say that again, Gaurav. I couldn't hear you.
Even the church, the Christian church, opposed Darwin when he proposed the theory of evolution.
Oh, of course. This was a huge problem for them because it challenged their very foundation, you know. But it allows people to stop being preachy, and then they have movements, for want of a better word, that stops preachiness, you know. And of course, to be very flippant, they send all their preachers away to places like India and you know, to
missionaries.
Yeah, all these missionaries, they send them away so that they don't have to listen to the preachy people, that we have to listen to them. And all that preachiness gets into our heads.
Yeah, very true.
A lot of India, a lot of what India is even today is based on 19th century. It's really India is a British invention, you know. And we continue those, even the sari, you think of the sari as an Indian garment. It is not an Indian garment. It's a British invention of an Indian garment. Before the British came, women wore nothing on top. They only wore the sari bit at the bottom and sometimes between their legs and sometimes just as a sari. Okay, the top was never covered. The British come along, and the sari was short. It was not long because you had to work in the fields. The British come along. The British cannot even see their table legs, never mind the legs of a woman. And we are the other. Read Syed, guys. Syed is very interesting. So what do?
Yeah.
You have to cover your legs. So the sari becomes longer. Okay. What is the, we have a word blouse. Blouse is an English word. We use the word petticoat. Petticoat is an English word. These are not words that we had in our language because we never use them. They get introduced by the British because it offends British sensibility of decorum. And what do they allow us to do? You can just show your midriff just a little bit. You know, this is again the other, being enticed by the other. We are the other. We are exotic. And so, oh yeah, let's have a little bit of midriff, man. And the sari gets invented. The sari is not an Indian dress. It is a British concoction of an Indian dress, as indeed our religion. Our religion was, I'm talking about the Hindu faith at the moment, by the way, and I'm not talking about Islam or Christianity. Islam has just as long a tradition in India, especially Sufism. But, you know, we have these words, Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh. Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh is not Indian. It is not Vedic. It is a British invention. What happens? The British arrive with their Trinity, you know, the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost, Amen, right? So we turn around and say, we are the subjugated. And we turn around and say, hey guys, you're not the only people who have a Trinity. We also have a Trinity. We've got Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh. And we create the Trinity in the 19th century. It's very interesting, you know. Read Kosambi. Kosambi is very interesting. Didi Kosambi, his name is. He writes about these kinds of issues. Very, very interesting.
Oh,
so
I
then
think,
bringing it back to digital literacy.
yeah.
If you think about all that, and if you think about the rubbish that at the moment is being put out by the Hindutva people, it is genuine rubbish. And it genuinely, for me, as someone who's deeply in love with India, but who now lives outside India, for me, it is very worrying that a continent is being divided and split along sectarian lines, which should never happen. And that bothers me. And for me, one of the big reasons why India needs and very urgently needs digital media literacy is so that these notions can be disabused, that people can actually question and challenge government. And it is only through digital media literacy that you can do that, you know. So there's my tuppence worth of it.
I think, Jaya, this is exactly what the kids were talking about in the morning, whether why they don't like the traditional forms of, news, like whether it is television news or newspapers. And they think that when they go on social media and there are other versions of the story, and the worry then again is, how do you identify which is genuine and which is fake? So it's all the more dangerous then, you know. We were just having
very, very dangerous. We are living in dangerous times, you know.
Yeah.
Yes, it is very dangerous. And you must absolutely investigate, where does this story come from? Who is telling the story and why? I asked you that question. Who is telling the apple picker story?
Yeah.
I am telling that story. Why? Black Lives Matter.
Right. Costa Banerjee has raised his hand. Srinivas, are you there? Srinivas?
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, Costa.
Ma'am, I just have my 2 cents to this as well. I think it's premium news that might cure the entire thing, because right now the news that is out there is free. So who's funding the media houses? Which is why the entire problem lies. If we are the ones who are funding them as a premium content consumer, I think they will cater to us more than the other houses out there. So I think that is the problem, according to me. If you want to agree.
Costa, that is a very interesting observation. Okay. Big data is a very big problem, you know. The big problem with big data is this, that they analyze who you are. Okay. uh, Look, when you go shopping, just beside you will come a list of things which say people who bought this also bought blah, blah, blah. And the next
Prompts.
time you log on, suddenly every single bloody pair of shoes that you were looking at appears. How? Because they know what you are looking at. And it's the
Artificial
same with news. If you are left wing, they will feed you more left wing news because that is how big data works. If you are right wing, they will feed you more right wing news because that is how big data works, which means that there is no opportunity for you to be fed with anything other than the things you believe in. And look at where it leads. It leads to Trumpism. Look at America. Even though Biden won, it's 51-49, man. It is not that big a difference. Look at North Korea. Forget the country I'm in, you know? But just look at what happens with big data. Unless we have ways of controlling big data, which is what you're talking about, we will be stuck. But here is an alternative, and that is the BBC. The BBC World Service is funded, carries advertisement, but BBC domestic service is not allowed to carry advertisement. It gets funded because every single person in the UK, household in the UK has to pay. And we pay our, like it's called the license fee. We pay the license fee and we get content. And the content is very, very cheap. You know, it is less than £1 a minute. And so many, there's BBC One, BBC Two, BBC Three, BBC Four, BBC Five, BBC Radio, and every single region has radio and Radio 4, Radio 3, Radio 2, Radio 1, Radio 5, Radio 6. So many channels, and all that gets funded by the license fee. And that is a very good model. Here is the problem with the license fee. The problem with the license fee is it has to increase every year, year on year, or every 3 years or whatever. You know, if it doesn't increase, you cannot pay journalists, you cannot pay filmmakers, you cannot pay content creators. If you can't pay content creators, the content you get is rubbish. You know, that is a real problem. The other problem is the government is always trying to influence the BBC. And in fact, at the moment, I'm deeply upset with the BBC. I think it's terrible. They have just become, they have stopped doing journalism. They've started doing PR. And that is what has happened in India. You know, where do you journalists get a job? You get a job in PR companies. So where does real journalism lie? These are questions that we as a world have to answer and confront.
Absolutely,
So
ma'am.
thank you for
Because
those thoughts. Yes, Costa.
I've barely seen any premium news houses out here. There are a few, however, it's not the dominant forces out there. The narrative for majority of the media houses are resonating with the ones who are funding them, probably the government or probably.
Of course, always,
And
darling,
so I
always.
think So I think if at all, if we start paying for our news, the news houses might cater our needs more than the sponsors' needs, and probably conditions our mind into a very proper manner instead of a biased manner.
No, I'm sorry. You are very, very beautifully naive.
Idealist.
Yes, very idealistic, Kaustav. No, they take your money, they cater to you, they find out what you like, and they feed you with the same. It's the same cornflakes in different packets. It is never cornflakes ek din or puri or ek din. नहीं होता है.
By the way, Jaya, I must tell you, we have Srinivas Challapalli here, who's worked with NDTV for more than 23, 24 years. I think, Srinivas, you should give the concluding remarks.
I'm still learning, ma'am. I'm still learning the ways of news now. I do agree with what Jam ma'am has said. Like, it's like big data is playing a big role in big news. So most of the bureaucrats are ruling the roost right now, and I think they're twisting it to feed the minds of the bhakts, as the people keep calling. But to each his own, to each the choices that we leave it at there. I mean, sadly, there are a lot of good news channels which are languishing but are not getting the funding. So they're forced to, in fact, mend their ways, actually. So that's tragedy, actually. And what you said,
NDTV is a good example,
tragedy.
They shut it down every time it says something against the government. कोई rule नहीं है यार आजकल इंडिया में. That's the problem.
Jatin, I think we will have to. Jaya, would you like to take this one last question, or should we?
Sure, I'll take the last question.
Yeah. That will be the last one. Yeah.
Okay, so good evening, ma'am. So, like the character you portrayed in the drama, it was obviously not very relatable to you. Matlab, it was not something that you see in your real life regularly. So, but still you lived the character very beautifully. So, like how you prepared yourself as an actor to portray such characters?
Trust me, somebody sees you like that, Bangladeshi will never know what you are actually. Great observation, Jatin. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
I don't know. How did I prepare? I did prepare, first of all. I think putting the clothes on changed me, and I thought very carefully about what I was going to wear, how I was going to look. And that really made me think of the character. That made a very big difference. And then putting on the accent, switching between Bengali and English. And Kaustav, you're Bengali. I hope I switched well, because you must know how people code switch to make it relatable, to make it believable.
Absolutely, ma'am.
Yeah, so those kinds of little tricks of the trade that actors have. And because I direct, I know what to expect from my actors. So it was turning it around and saying, okay, forget the directing bit, just do the acting bits. So that's how I prepared. I did read the script beforehand. That helped. Also, let me tell you something very naughty that helps me enormously. And that is, because I'm supposed to look at the screen, I had the words just beside me on the screen. I didn't have to learn the words up. So there was no memorizing involved, whereas Harry actually learned the words. If you look at him, he moves his face here, there, everywhere. And if you look at me, I'm staring at the screen. I'm reading those words. That's an affordance of digital media.
Yes. So I think we can stop here, Jaya, with your permission.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, Jaya. As I had promised my students, you will never regret being a part of the session. I'm seeing so many messages coming personally to me also. They need to be brought to the water, and they may need to make it drink also, in these situations. But I think they enjoy today's day.
And
Srinivas,
enjoy
Sudha
the
ma'am is
rest
there.
of the, please enjoy the rest of
Yes,
your
ma'am.
conference.
Sorry, Jaya.
I said, please enjoy the rest of your
And
conference.
we would be very happy if you could join as and whenever you're free. We are sending the links to you also for the next 2 days. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jaya. Thank you. Yes,
Okay.
over to Sudha ma'am.
Awesome.
Hi, everybody. It gives me great pleasure to present the vote of thanks for Jaya ma'am session. It was really a very, very interesting, intriguing, and immensely satisfying because it gave us so many perspectives. Thank you so much, Jaya ma'am. Lovely to have you with us, and hope to see
Thank
you
you very
soon.
much. Yes,
Yeah,
I want to come to India.
yeah. Please do. Please
I'm
do.
waiting. Next plane. As soon as they open, I'll be there.
No,
Okay. See you then. Thanks.